Hey, good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when you're watching this or where you're watching this. This is a kind of a revisit to a podcast I did during the pandemic called A Conversation. And this is now a conversation or a frank conversation with Bobby Rivers. Bobby Rivers, for those of you who don't know, was an entertainment reporter and had his career started in Milwaukee. Although Bobby came from South Central Los Angeles, he graduated from Marquette University in Milwaukee. He was a VJ on VH1 in the late 80s. He had his own primetime celebrity talk show. And the New York Times hailed Bobby Rivers as a master interviewer with a gift for banter. I know a lot of people from the Midwest and Milwaukee area will know Bobby, and other people outside of that, such as Paul McCartney, who he interviewed. He had cocktails with Lucille Ball. Got a soundbite from the elusive but iconic Betty Davis. And Bobby's got a chance to hug it out with Tom Hanks. So he's been around. In 2000, Bobby was made the news, entertainment editor, and film critic for a weekday Lifetime TV show called Lifetime Live. He was a Food Network host. I've got a list here. I don't know how far I can keep going down this line. I want to save some for Bobby, but those are just some of Bobby's highlights. So I'm extremely excited and privileged to be able to have him as a co-host. And with all that said, let's say hi to Bobby. Hi, Bobby. How are you?
Frank, thanks for having me on. It's good to
Thanks
be
for,
here.
thanks for letting me stumble over your introduction here. I'm a little disheveled, but it's great to have you on. Like I said, I'm sure a lot of people know you from the Midwest area and that, but tell me a little bit about your career and what you've done.
Well, okay. I started, my career started in Milwaukee, really. My first TV appearance was in Los Angeles when I was in high school, and I was on a game show, a film trivia show called The Movie Game. And at the time, and this was a syndicated show, so my grandparents in New Jersey got to see it. I was the, at the time we did the taping in Hollywood, I was the youngest contestant and the first black contestant and the first black winner. And so, you, and the point of doing the show for me was not to win prizes as I did, but to really prove to my mom especially that having this interest in classic films and actors and filmmakers was not just adolescent vaporing. I was serious about it. And so what I went to Marquette, graduated, and started my professional career on 93 QFM radio.
I remember that radio station.
And that's where that's where I got the soundbite from Betty Davis.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah, so um, originally, what I wanted to do, when I was a kid, kid going back to like junior high and high school, I wanted to be an actor. And my parents were kind of nervous about that, which I later understood because they were of an era in which they saw people like Dorothy Dandridge, who had a lot of talent, but had to face all those color walls. And my parents just felt, you know what, you're going to have to hit the same walls. You will. And I thought, well, we were going into the 60s and then we're going into the 70s. And I thought things had changed. So my plan was if I can't get into acting, then I want to talk about movies and I want to talk to the filmmakers because I never, uh, we had movie shows on local TV in Southern California. I never saw anybody who looked like me presenting the movies. The same thing when I got to Milwaukee, and I don't remember Bruce Bennett in Milwaukee,
Yeah, yeah,
and he was
vaguely.
okay. He was a movie host, and then when I got to New York, it was the same thing. American movie classics before I went into programming with Mad Men and
Breaking
Breaking
Bad.
Bad was all classic movies, and they never had a black host. That coupled with the decades of film critics that we saw that Siskel and Ebert, and they were so popular that they spawned other duos, and the duos were all white men. So when whenever I turn on the TV, and the same applied each ABC, NBC, and ABC in our day, each had a film critic who would be on Fridays and review films. You don't
Right.
see that now because the morning news shows are attached to a film company, so
Sure.
they wouldn't want, yeah. But you know, when I saw critics talking about The Color Purple or Do the Right Thing, or you know, the Butler down to 12 Years a Slave, it was always through the white gaze. You know, there was
Yeah.
never any person of color doing that. So to make a long story short, I got into the business to distinguish myself and hopefully add some diversity, and also hopefully opening a door a little wider for somebody else to come in.
Well, Bobby, you've done such a great job, and I think what's amazing is, I mean, I've known you for a little while. I've known you,
Yeah.
I think, God, years ago we had lunch in New York when you were in
Yes.
New York,
Yes. Yeah.
and I think the amazing thing to me is where you went from, kind of a local TV station guy. Was it PM Magazine? Were you on PM
It was
Magazine
PM
there?
Magazine. Yeah. Can I
Do
explain to
you?
the PM?
Yeah, yeah,
PM Magazine was it was sort of it was the syndicated Monday through Friday evening magazine show that was a forerunner to Entertainment Tonight,
right,
because you know it would have celebrity interviews. Then in the middle there would be somebody telling you things to do around town. There would be a chef, and the and you would have co-hosts. You would do a local feature, and maybe if that local feature was deemed good enough for national airing by the front office, it
right,
would
right.
air nationally. So there was a cluster of really good producers with PM Magazine who left that show, and they left San Francisco to go down to LA and start a new show, and
And
that
that
show
was
was called Entertainment
Entertainment
Tonight.
Tonight. Yeah. So
Yeah.
you went from that, and so then that you jumped at the how did the VH1 gig come about? Because were
You
you
know,
a VJ on there, or did you
I
go
was a
right to a talk show?
I was a VJ and I had the talk show.
Okay. Because I
So
remember that was a pop. That was during the era of course when music videos were starting, right, and getting really popular, and
yeah,
they make a
yeah,
station. And VH1 was a big deal, man. That was at
and they
that
really
time.
get
Go ahead.
and they rarely get talked about today.
Yeah,
The-
it's funny.
because everybody will talk about the glory days of MTV networks of
Right.
MTV, and
Sure.
we were a sister station. We were also on
Yeah.
MTV
Video
networks,
hits one. It stood for, right? Yeah.
right? And we also had
Yeah.
VJs. How that came about, it was you know there. I'm sure people will say, well, why didn't you stay home in Los Angeles and go to UCLA or USC, film schools there? And there was there was something in me that said, choose Marquette, choose Marquette. So and so and honestly, you know, when the winters hit, I thought, why did I choose Marquette? But I was working at 93 QFM. That was
Yeah.
the first professional broadcast job. When I was at QFM, there was an exec at a competing station who contacted me, and he wanted to steal me away. And so at the time, you know, we had dinner. I said, "Oh, I have to tell you this. I haven't given the word to QFM yet, but I got contacted by WISN TV, which is Milwaukee's ABC affiliate, and they were
Right.
interested in me in doing
Right.
film reviews every week for PM Magazine. And my goal was to get on TV. And he said, "Okay, I totally understand." He said, "What's your ultimate goal?" And I said, "My ultimate goal is to get to New York." And he said, "Me too." I get to New York working at WPIX Channel 11 in 1985. And in my second year, I start getting these phone messages from a guy named Jeff Rowe. And I went, "Who is this?" And I would call, and, you know, he wasn't in. And finally, I got him on the phone. He said, "Babala, it's Dallas." Well,
Babala.
Dallas Cole
Yeah.
was his
Dallas Cole.
Milwaukee,
Sure.
right? That was his performance name. He was an executive now at VH1.
Okay.
VH1 was having guests come on as guest VJs, and they asked me to do it. He saw me, he liked me, they offered me a job, and I took it.
Now that was the
Jeff,
VJ job, though, right?
that was the VH1 VJ job. So
Yeah.
I left the local show I was working on in New York City, went over to VH1, three of the happiest years of my career. And Jeff, who I knew in Milwaukee, was the guy who greenlit my celebrity primetime talk show.
Okay. Okay.
So
That's where
then
it
when
came.
that happened, I went,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that was that was amazing, and I got a little thing here of I don't
uh-huh,
know if you can see of all the people coming up. That I mean, you had a pretty amazing guest list. I think a lot of these people were probably from that show. Some may not be, but
yes.
you
These
ran
are
the gambit
all
there.
uh, she was Fox New York when I did in later years of the '90s. McCartney, man, that hour show, and that's later on in the '90s, and that was on vacation, hanging out with Harry Connick. That's VH1, my talk show guest. Elizabeth McGovern, Dudley Moore was on my talk show.
Yeah, it's pretty
I
some
was and
pretty iconic people. I mean, and
Rosie O'Donnell. Yeah,
I think the thing
oh,
that I always
stop there.
liked it.
You see, you look at you see the Billy
Yeah.
Crystal photo.
Yes. Yes.
Can you go back to that number
I
again?
actually can't. I've got it running straight through here, but I didn't. I
That
can't
was
pause
taken
it
in
up.
front of the Performing Arts Center
Yeah, it's just
in Milwaukee.
yeah, it's pretty amazing. I mean, you did, and I think one of the things that I like about it, I had a couple friends that had other little talk show things, and the way you handled these people and the way they warmed up to you was pretty amazing. And I don't know if any of these relationships went beyond the talk show or that you kept in touch with some of these people. But I think the cool part about it is you had that kind of chemistry that made them feel very comfortable, and it was almost almost like they became your friend during the show. So
Well, you know what? I really prided myself on doing a lot of homework, and I think this is just me. I said, okay, the purpose of doing the interview is to talk to the filmmaker, the actor, the actress, or director, producer about their work. You can be entertaining, but that person is the celebrity. You're not the celebrity.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it was like my work was to do so, ask questions that would highlight their work and their talent, and then come up with something else to show I'd done my research. The I was at Channel 12 in Milwaukee and doing PM Magazine, and I got the chance to interview Jack Lemmon. Right, so I interviewed him, and there was at a point where I asked him something, and he said, "How did you know that?" And I said, "It was in James Cagney's autobiography." And he said, "I want you to stay around after the interview." And uh, Lemon was very much a social activist. He used to do these like local specials when I was a kid in LA, about the environment and other social
sure,
issues. And I think that he knew that at that time, you never saw black people on TV covering entertainment or doing celebrity interviews. And he said, "Do you like doing these interviews?" I said, "Yes." He said, "You're good at it. Pursue that."
oh, that's great.
And I went, "Okay." So I went back to, and NPM Magazine, fortunately, did let me pursue that. You know,
Well, to get that kind of encouragement from that kind of iconic star is pretty
it's not, what
nice.
about,
Yeah,
and even when I had the VH1 job, it's like, they're the celebrity, you're the interviewer. Don't think you're on that same staircase level with them.
yeah, yeah.
So and I think because to me, I see some interviews now with younger folks, and I wonder, did you do any homework or because it's like, wait a minute, they're trying to act like a celebrity too, but you could tell that their questions aren't really that imaginative.
Yeah.
There were some people that wanted to hang out. Well, I'll tell you this. Because he was so charming, he was so friendly and playful. Patrick Swayze, and he said, and I would see him. I saw him at functions in New York City before I got on VH1, and then I get on VH1. Dirty, the Dirty Dancing was a hit. And then he said, we need to go hang out and have a beer. And we did. And I went,
Oh, that's great.
ah.
Yeah,
Hey,
there's
oh,
certain guys, that have that reputation, right? To be, nice. That was a great loss.
Hanks, it was.
Yeah,
It was.
yeah,
You got time for a quick Patrick Swayze story?
yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, so there was some function in New York, and we were both at this function. And this was before I started, was it before I started VH1? Yeah, I think it was.
Mhm.
So we're in this bar, and this bar restaurant. And this restaurant, by the way, was used as a location in the Tom Hanks movie Big. It's the place where he eats the caviar or the baby corn. He goes,
Yeah, yeah.
okay. So I asked Patrick, "What's going on?" He said, "Okay, He
Sorry,
said,
I
"I
lost you for a
got."
minute.
He said, "I got the script, but I think it needs work because it's." He said, "Right now it reads like meatballs with music." I went, "Oh, so he described the script." So
Yeah, yeah.
rewrites were done on the script, and the music and the dancing were kept in, and it became Dirty Dancing. But he thought it was
I,
going to be one of those goofy comedies.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and just for the people listening or the people that watch this, I mean, this is the idea behind bringing Bobby in for this in the first place. Your experience and your bevy of stories that you have about trivia and people and inside looks at this are amazing. We could go on and on and on with this, and we will in uh, future podcasts. But one of the things I wanted to do, just off track of where this podcast usually will go, is I want to talk about what's going on in the entertainment industry with first the writers' strike and then moving into the SAG strike. And I know, Bobby, you've got some insights into that, but I thought it would be worthwhile to bring in actually a working actor. I've got in the green room right now an actor by the name of Sean Sharma. He's a working actor, a SAG-AFTRA union leader, acting educator. I'm sorry, I have to read all this stuff, guys, but I memorize it all.
good.
A
Read it.
writer,
Read it.
I know, writer, top casting session director. Sean is on the international hit TV show The Chosen, and he was kind enough yesterday as he was flying in from Utah, I think on location in Utah, decided he would try to make our podcast yesterday. And I wasn't flying in from anywhere, but I'm the one that had to screw it up. But Sean is the founder of the Storytellers Conservatory. He's an on-camera acting studio guest lecturer for the University of Southern California, an adjunct professor for Pace University School of Drama. Do you want me to keep going on here, Sean? Because I think if I bring you on here, you can you can kind of tell everyone your credentials before we kind of get into the meat of this thing. So
No, you did a great job, but when you say it all together like that, it sounds like I've actually done something with my life.
it sounds good, doesn't it? Yeah. Well, thanks for being here, man. Thanks for lending your knowledge and your insight. And I told you kind of in the pre-interview thing here that what we really want to do is try to get to the layman, the idea of what is going on with this entertainment strike. And I think people will relate to what I said earlier to you guys was, most people look at this and go, come on, these actors are making millions of dollars. What are they complaining about? And I want to let the layman understand how this is going to affect them, number one, and how this really isn't about the $20 million actor. This is about the working actor, so to speak. So if you can kind of talk to that a little bit, I'd appreciate it.
Oh, sure. I mean, I can't begrudge any member of the public having the misconception that it's the highest earners that are the union, but that's actually the exact opposite. The highest earners, they have their own contracts and attorneys and publicists, and they do their own deals. They almost never work for the minimum terms that our contracts actually require. And so our union and our union contracts apply to everybody but the stars and the highest earners, really, and those highest earners are a fraction of 1% of our entire 170,000 members union. It's not dissimilar than if other people around the world would be like, look at all those rich people. Everyone is rich in America.
Yeah.
It's like, well, that's a really small percentage. Most of us are just scraping by. And so I think because of the glamorous nature of some of the work we do, and because so much of our work is done in private when we're rehearsing in our bedrooms with our friends and family or whatever, or acting community, they just see what shows up on the screen and in the movies. But literally, when you're watching a TV show or a movie, take your eye off of the star for a second and look at literally every other person on screen. Those are our members. Those are the
All
ones
those
that
working actors, right?
that includes the people in the background. It includes all the voiceover. It includes the stunts, the singers, the dancers. That's SAG-AFTRA, and the few that are fortunate to be making a lot of money, we look to them to help amplify the message, because the union was created by the most fortunate to protect everybody else who is not in that position of leverage. So
Exactly. And so, Sean, so the people are out there saying, what are these guys looking for? A raise? They want more money? What are they? What are the issues? What are the issues that are affecting them right now?
Yeah, I think it's the same issues that affect any labor community, whether it's people who work in factories or whether it's people who work in offices or nurses or public education professionals, et cetera. It's that if we don't get taken care of, and if our negotiations are not strong enough in the past, we end up in a place where we're not able to survive, and our employers are making obscene profits, and there's just a lack of balance between the profits and making sure you're not salting the earth that you depend on for the growth of the business or for the life of the business, really. And so the reason why not only the writers but the performers are on strike is because almost none of us can make a living doing this anymore, and yet the companies are making record profits. They went on a 3-year binge of spending so much money on content, everyone wanted to be like Netflix, where they were chasing subscribers and wanted to be seen as tech companies as opposed to boring old TV networks, etc. And they realized that the business model that Netflix was running was not sustainable. It didn't reflect the actual value of the work that we were doing. And so now they're crying poverty because Wall Street is no longer willing to just throw money at them for growth. Wall Street is expecting them to turn a profit, and yet they've completely upended the business model that everybody's familiar with, that worked since the 60s, that if you watch a TV show and it does well, they can charge more for advertising and the cast can get more money because they're on a hit show. But when it's on a streaming platform, nobody gets the data to know what's working, what's not, and our residuals don't work the same way, which is us continuing to make money when our performances are being shown and people are profiting off of them. So we're now fighting not only for our economic lives, not only to protect our pension and health plans, but we're also trying to fight back against artificial intelligence and the threat that has to replace the work that not just performers on camera and behind the microphone do, but also labor in general. So we're kind of the canary in the coal mine saying, like, our jobs are at risk right now because you can just scan us with a computer and then recreate our behavior and our voices, and we need to protect that.
Right, and I think what people are thinking, I'm not positive of this. At least what I've heard is people are thinking, well, they're asking for more. So okay, so now these $200 million budget movie have to be more because pay. I think what was the last strike was what in the 70s, like when Reagan was president, wasn't that the last
when Reagan
time
was when the 1960 strike took place. That was the last time the Writers Guild and SAG-AFTRA, or SAG at the time, struck at the same time. And
Reagan was a Democrat then.
Well, it was under Reagan's presidency that we established the health plan and the pension plan and got residuals for our films that were exhibited on TV. So it was a monumental achievement for our union, that 1960 double strike. We struck this contract on our own in 1980. And so that was the last time we've had a strike of the television and film agreement. So it's been 43 years. And in those 43 years, the business model has completely changed.
And I think one of the things we want to make clear too is, the writers and the SAG actors they're asking for a piece of the pie, basically from the studio system and from those people. They're not saying we need to make more money from the public. Hey, you need to give us more money. those guys are making tons of money. You just want a little more of the piece of the pie. Share the wealth, more or
Oh
less,
yeah,
right?
they've made billions and billions in profits over the last few years, and we haven't seen any of that. And the reason for that is because instead of us getting paid more when a show or a film we do does well, they've been collecting subscriptions and they've been
Mm,
collecting payments when you pay every month for Netflix or whatever. We don't see a penny of that. But
mm,
if you were to watch a show on TV, the ratings would mean that we would get more money with our salary and with our
right,
residuals and
right,
things like
right.
that. So the companies have decoupled our ability to participate in the success of any of the work that we do. And we depend on those residual payments to get us through the fact that every actor has ups and downs with their career. You're on a show one moment, you're trying to get on a show the next
Right.
moment. And so without those
Mhm.
continuing revenue streams, nobody can make a living. And so that's why 87% of our members earn less than $26,000 a year. And so when you think of 170,000 SAG-AFTRA members, just think that almost 90% of them make less than
Mhm.
$26,000 a
Mhm.
year, and that 9 out of 10, and that tells you why we're on
Right.
strike.
And there's a cap. I was reading the other day. There's a low cap, right? In order to even be qualified for any kind of health insurance or anything, you guys have to make a certain amount, and a big chunk of it aren't
26,000,
make. Is that the 26? Yeah, and
$26,470.
90% of them aren't making enough to even get there, right?
Right.
87%. That's correct.
And you look. I was reading also about the streaming. About the streaming companies, and when these movies and series go out to the streaming companies, there are so many of them now, right? I mean, there's going to be a consolidation. There's got to be. These guys can't all survive. They're just not all going to survive. There's got to be a big consolidation. Do you think that when that consolidation happens and we get off of these, we got Tubi, you got I don't know, I can't even name them all. But if they consolidate down, do you think it'll be a better bargaining or a better or easier bargaining to go to them and say, okay, now these guys own the majority of the streaming. We need to get a chunk of that money, or do you think it's? I'm curious. It's so complex right now. Going and saying, okay, we want a piece of that streaming money when maybe some of these guys aren't pulling hardly anything down or not. I'm talking about the streaming companies, and then when the other guys are going after them saying we need you need to pay us for those shows. Well, are they giving them away? What do you know what's happening in that realm?
Well, what we're going through is not dissimilar to what happened in the 2008 recession, which is where we had these companies that were doing these reckless things with the mortgage backed securities and all of these things that ended up wrecking the global economy. And who was left holding the bag? It was the American taxpayer that bailed them out. And now
Mhm.
that's the same thing they're trying to do here. They went on this reckless spending spree and cut our compensation. And then now they want us to stay low with our compensation so that they can protect their quarterly earnings reports and their share price and give themselves millions of dollars of executive bonuses. And I think so. It doesn't matter how many companies there are because they all negotiate as part of the AMPTP, which is the Alliance of Motion Picture Television Producers. So
Mhm.
we're not dealing with them individually. We're dealing with one entity, regardless of if
Entity.
there's 350 or there's 30. That's the group that we're negotiating against. What the real issue is we have a sick corporate culture in the United States that puts the benefit of shareholders and CEOs above everybody else in the organization. The employees, everybody gets pushed to the side. It's all about the stock price. It's all about the CEOs getting rewarded for short-term profits. And we're
Sure.
seeing it destroy industry after industry where these big unicorns blow up and it was a Ponzi scheme essentially. And
Mhm.
so, we have to end this sick cycle. So especially when we're sitting across from these companies in the negotiating room, it literally feels like we're dealing with sociopaths. It feels like we're
Mm,
dealing with robots that don't really care about the human part of it. And I think part of it comes with being, a fiduciary for a company and you're supposed to deliver profits for shareholders. So it's like they almost are forced to think like robots that are impersonal and insensitive. But when they put out statements saying that their plan is to impoverish us and make us lose our homes so that we'll can just take whatever deal they want, how do you negotiate with the company that's trying to make you homeless?
yeah, there's no negotiation there, right? There's just we tell you, and that's the way it goes. The you mentioned AI too, which I think is interesting. I think people are becoming more aware of that now, not only from the standpoint of, you're seeing a lot of it in movies now where they're de-aging actors and they're doing those kind of things. And to the point, another article I read the other day where, and maybe you can refresh my memory on this, but it was something about they were going after certain actors and saying, we want to buy your likeness, we'll pay you a one-time fee for it, and then we can use it as long as we want. Right?
Well, we
I
went in, we went in with a very robust proposal on making sure that the companies could keep doing things that are reasonable that they do as part of the production process of little tweaks here and there and whatever that they do. There's some AI tools that make it more efficient for them, but it doesn't substantially change our performance. It doesn't change what we're saying. It doesn't change our intention. It doesn't put us in scenes we were not in. It doesn't use our name and likeness and change our performances that we have rights over. But so we went in and we gave them a proposal that gave them the flexibility for that, but it protected us from our name and our likeness and our voice being used without our consent, without compensation. And for a month, they kept trying to change the language so that they could punch holes in it to be able to do things like scan us one time, own our likeness forever, and then it would actually be cheaper. It would be cheaper for them to then murder us and use our digital replica forever.
that's something. I hate to laugh. I'm sorry, but
it's true.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
It sounds like a science fiction movie, doesn't it? It's kind of like, well, we'll bring you in or we'll kill you, and then we'll just use your likeness.
Right.
That's great, right?
Then we don't need that. We can just hire another person to come in and use their body like a puppet, and then we can put your face and your voice on their performance.
Yeah.
Like, it sounds like science fiction, but that's literally what we're fighting.
Yeah. Well, and what was it? What was the Star Wars movie, right, where they brought back Carrie Fisher, and she had been dead for years. They brought her back, and I mean, a trained eye or a semi-trained eye, I guess. You look at it, they haven't quite been able to quite get that down pat, but it's coming, man. I mean,
we're in the very early stages of this technology. Just you wait; it's growing so quickly, and to that point, literally, the AMPTP companies said that once we're dead, that they wanted the right to be able to use our digital replica without our permission, for the rest of time. So they could make movies with your animated corpse for the rest of time.
Yeah. Well, and anybody, I mean, I'm sure you guys have seen deep fake Tom Cruise. Have you seen him?
Yeah.
I mean, the first time I saw that, I was fooled. I looked at it and I was like, well, what the heck is Tom Cruise doing? What is he doing on Instagram, whatever. So you look at that technology and you could like you said, Sean, you could very easily see, okay, well, we'll take this Harrison Ford and we'll take his likeness and then we'll put this young guy in and we can keep doing Indiana Jones movies for as long as we want. We'll just use a younger actor and put his face up there and mock his voice and away we go. Yeah, it's pretty scary stuff. What about, now I know, I'm sorry, go ahead, Sean.
Oh, no, I was just quickly going to say that I don't know anybody who saw Avatar: The Way of the Water, the new Avatar movie.
Yeah.
Yes.
It has now gotten to the point where you literally cannot tell what's real and what's not. Yeah. And that was water that was they had to create a whole new technology to do the performance capture underwater. But when I'm looking at a movie for so long, you've been able to tell this was computer generated. Yeah. But we've gotten to the point where it's pretty much impossible to tell what's real and what's not.
It is pretty amazing. When I did the last podcast during the pandemic, I had a good friend of mine works for Industrial Light and Magic, and she came on and we were going through clips and everything. Now remember, this is like 2 years ago. And she came on and that's exactly her thing. It was like, we are getting to the point where photorealistic is beyond anything. I mean, it looks realistic. You can't even call it photorealistic anymore. And I was just going to ask you, I know you're SAG, but from the writer's side, something like ChatGPT, like, are they worried about that too? Because I mean, that stuff's amazing too. I mean, you write me a script about with John and Will and these two guys going on an adventure, but boom, you put it in and it gives you 6 paragraphs of a story, which is pretty amazing.
What they're trying to do is, imagine anybody who works in an office. There are times when you're furiously working, and there's other times when you're in a meeting where you're not really doing a lot of work. You're just listening to the meeting and paying attention. And there's other times where, you have time at work to do other things. And so essentially what they're trying to do to us and to writers is only the time when you are actively working, Are you going to get paid? Forget your yearly salary. We're only going to pay you for the time that you're
Hmm.
actually got pen to paper or fingers on the keyboard. The rest of the time, we're not going to pay you. So they're basically trying to get rid of our term employment, like being able to have a
Right.
reliable career, that we're just gig workers who are basically only on the clock when they want us to be on the clock, and we don't get paid any other way. And yet they also control us, so we can't go work for other people when we're not working on something for them. They want to lock us into these contracts, but not allow us to work for someone else, but not pay us for that downtime. So it's happening to the writers. The writers basically said, we want to make sure we can make careers out of this and that we're training
Hmm.
people to be able to run shows in the future. But instead, they just want to pay these. They want to use
Mhm.
ChatGPT to write a script that's
Yeah.
basically,
Yeah.
the way ChatGPT and these large language models work is they basically take everything that's been fed into them, which is our human created work, and then it spits out something that's kind of a mishmash of all of that. And then they want to bring in a writer for just a day or here to just fix it, to just make it better, and cutting out the writer from the entire creative process beforehand, which isn't even really how art works. So it's kind of
Yeah.
what, when aliens try to think of how do movies get made, it's like, oh, we
Yeah.
can just create a script and someone will fix it.
And do it. Yeah.
And so what the
I
writer
uh,
said, please don't use artificial intelligence to replace us. And the answer from the studios was, we're not going to promise that, but we will meet with you every
uh,
year to tell you about technology and what's changed in technology.
Yeah. Were you going to say something, Bobby?
yeah, I I hate that because I'm pro writers, and you can put that information into a machine, if they hit you on, but those machines have not experienced the human condition. They have not fallen in love. They've not experienced heartbreak. They haven't gone through childbirth. They haven't got experienced the death of a loved one. So you need the writers. And as far as TV, the writers are always disadvantaged. That in our day when we were kids, like the days of like the Mary Tyler Moore show, you had 26 weeks, and it became 13, and now a series is like 6 episodes,
Hmm.
and like many of the working class actors, not the A-listers like a Vin Diesel or Tom Hanks, they do a job and then they've got a side gig. They're working at a card shop or a bookstore,
Right.
or they're delivering food.
Or they
And
used to live off the residuals, right, from the 26
right,
until they could get their next job. But now
now when
with an eight episodes, right there, it's not there.
for years I was on live morning news shows in New York City, and I'm sure people thought I was making big money. And I think it was that, well, he's black and he's on TV, he must be making the same as Oprah. And it's like, no.
Has
So
anybody made the same as Oprah? I don't
well,
think.
but the point was, I had, that was the rent money, and then I did background work. I did bit
Sure.
parts, and one of my side gigs was I worked at a video rental store in the Chelsea area of New York, and I loved that side job. And there were a number of guys who were regular customers, and then they all got cast on a show called Oz on HBO,
Sure.
and the show is becoming popular. They still kept their side gigs, you know, be,
Yeah. Yeah.
because they needed to. And what Sean talking about earlier, people from cast members from Orange is the New Black have been posting their residual checks, and it's no lie, residual checks for under 10 cents.
And that was
Or what?
was that a Netflix show, right? That was yeah.
It was, but part of the reason that happened, which is so weird about our business, and it's a real flaw in our contract, because the first version of our contract was negotiated in 1937.
Oh,
So we've basically been building on a foundation that was built in 1937.
37, yeah.
So what it does is it limits us, where we have to basically fight and negotiate with our employers for us to get paid for our work to be exhibited in a new way. So they're like, "Hey, we're showing your work in theaters, you get paid, but we're not going to pay you if it's shown on TV." So we had to negotiate. Even the work we do is the same, but the fact that you're putting it on a smaller screen than the big screen means we now have to fight to be, to get paid there. Then they're like, hey, we're going to start putting out home delivery or cable, and they make us discount our
Sure.
work to be able to negotiate to get on that. Then they're like, hey, we're going to stream it online, but it's a new thing. Who knows if it's going to work? We can't afford to pay you
Right.
what you want. So we've had to discount ourselves every time these new ways of showing our work take place, but that shouldn't be off of our backs. These companies doing new things and taking those risks, our work hasn't changed. Our ability to make a living doesn't get easier. So why should we subsidize their new business ventures, which is essentially what we've been doing? So Orange is the New Black, House of Cards, these were some of the first original programs created by streamers for themselves before they would license content from other production companies. But this is a case where Netflix wanted to make it and show it on its own platform and save a
Right.
bunch of money that they would have to spend buying the content from somewhere else. And so for us to be able to be covered on Netflix in those ways, we had to discount ourselves. A lot of those shows didn't give any residuals for the
Mm.
first,
Mhm.
pass at this. And so these people are on these huge hit shows, and people don't know they're not making next to no
Making
money.
anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we look at, so okay, so now we kind of got the idea, and I think hopefully there's some sympathy out there for people trying to make a living, right? And that's what we're doing. This isn't millionaires saying, "Give me us another $1 million." These are people making a living, hopefully, or close to a living with maybe a second job, and now you're getting screwed out of that. But what I want to do too now is examine how is this going to affect the public? What do we expect if this thing goes on? I mean, already I think there's a buffer. We got a bit of a buffer in there built, but I think now as this keeps stretching out with actors and writers, Sean? Do you see any other of the organizations like and I'm not even sure, like maybe editor, anybody else joining in and saying I will join into this to give them a little bit more
Well,
leverage?
any unions are bound by the national labor law that's administered by the Department of Labor. So
Hmm.
one of the rules that there are is something called a no strike clause, which means when you have an agreement, a contract with an employer, you can't strike until that contract is over. So even if we have other unions that are sympathetic with us, they're
They
actually
can't do.
they can't legally
They,
strike out of sympathy or solidarity with
ah,
what we're doing.
Mm.
That's why we couldn't go out on strike with the writers when they went out on strike, because we still
gotcha.
had a month left on our contract, and we would have been in violation if we would have.
So are there any contracts coming up that you
Well,
know of?
in the entertainment industry, the DGA
Yeah.
just signed their new contract, and then there's the
Mm.
writers and us, and then there's IATSE and Teamsters, and they have their negotiations coming up next year.
Oh boy.
Wow.
So tell me how this is going to affect us, right? What's
What?
going to happen to the series, to the movies, what's going to happen here in 6 months if this keeps going? Oh, I'm sorry, Bobby.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Uh, Sean could. Sean can tell you what's going to happen with the series and whatnot. I still listen to. I stream KNX radio because I grew up in LA and I grew up listening
Sure.
to the radio station. And they've been doing some excellent coverage on the strike. And a report just a couple of days ago was this could cost Southern California $3 billion. And why? It's the trickle down effect. It's like one guy called in and he said, I'm not making any money. He said, I'm in produce, but most of my customers were the caterers who work on the sets.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
have people who own costume shops or prop shops or hair salons, or there's
Yeah. Think about it, right?
a lot of single working mothers in the industry who
Hmm.
left their kids at daycare centers, but now those women aren't working. So the daycare centers have fewer
Yeah.
children to take. Yeah, and that's it. And I don't think a lot of the public realize the trickle down effect of that. It's like, well, Meryl Streep's making millions. It's not just
Yeah.
that. It's
You're
Think
exactly
about
right. I never even thought of like craft services and you're right. And all
yes.
those things that
about
all
that.
those other people.
Yeah, so just think about what Bobby said. These billion, trillion dollar companies that are able to pay their executives $250 million bonuses or salaries are willing to put that kind of damage on the economy to protect 2% of their profits.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ridiculous how they thought that we would just roll over for them and accept whatever they put across the table, when we actually stood up for the fact that our members can't make a living. And they knew the economic impact it was having on everybody, and especially because the writers were already on strike when we were negotiating, and they didn't care. It didn't change their corporate sociopathy. So that's kind of what we're up against. So I think how the public's going to be impacted is, hopefully it will wake them up to see that where you spend your money matters, and the kinds of companies that you're feeding with your dollars. We're all kind of complicit, which is why when the Writers Guild went on strike, the first thing I did is cancel all my streaming subscriptions. And I said the
Good
reason
for
I'm
you.
canceling is because you're not paying your writers fairly. Now, I'm not. The union hasn't called for a consumer boycott yet. The Writers Guild hasn't called for one yet. But it's a tool that we have in our arsenal to say, do we really want to be picketing a company by day and watching their content at night and giving them our hard-earned money? It doesn't
Right.
make sense. And I think a lot of people have been able, and especially in this country, we were so privileged and fortunate that we get to have such a great lifestyle that is subsidized by other people suffering somewhere else in the world by giving us cheap goods and things like that.
Yeah.
And in this case, it's coming home to roost that we've fed this corporate appetite for profits. And so I think that what I'm hoping is going to happen is a real resurgence of independent films, and for different producers, because we've had over 100 films and TV shows sign on to what's called our interim agreement, which basically all these big AMPTP companies, we're striking them. We won't work for them until they give us a deal. But we can go make these independent movies with people who are willing to accept our terms, who are willing to protect us against AI, who are willing to give us the raises, the working conditions improvements, etc. And then that can help feed our community, and the crew and all those people you just talked
Right.
about can subsist. And it helps. It's almost like we're in a different time than we have been in the past, because those big companies can't stranglehold all of TV and film production.
Right.
There are other
Too many
independent.
outlets. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I agree. Well, guys, this has really been for me educational. I hope for the audience educational, kind of understanding this a little bit more. Go ahead, Bobby.
Yeah. But before we sign off, I just want to
Yep.
thank Sean for all his hard work on the SAG board. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you
Yeah,
so
Sean,
much.
you've been great. I really appreciate you joining us today and giving people some insight into what's going on. It's been really, and I love your passion. I can definitely feel it, and I wish you guys tons of luck. And I have so many friends that are in SAG, and including my brother, who's in. So I'm hoping
Man,
that this thing gets worked out.
One
I,
quick thing
I,
I'll just say as a
Yeah,
parting thing on that is one of my friends on the negotiating committee, Kevin E. West, likes to say, when you tell when you tell your parents you're dating an actor, they're like, oh, they're never going to make a living. But as soon as we are on strike, they're like, look at all those rich people striking.
yeah, you're exactly right. Yeah, that's how it's looked at. So, all right, Sean, I'll let you go. Bobby and I are going to stick for a little bit. Like I said, I really appreciate your time. It was great to meet you. I hope we get a chance to talk again, and maybe next time we talk more about your projects and things that are going on, and not all the trouble that's going on. So,
So such a pleasure. Thank you,
amen.
Bob.
yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks much,
Thank
Sean.
you, Sean.
See ya.
Take care. Well, that was interesting, wasn't it, Bobby? I mean, talking to
He,
a
God bless him. What
yeah,
a good man. What a good guest. He really
yeah.
he broke it down the way we needed to hear it.
Exactly, and I hope we've given a little bit of understanding, from the standpoint of these are not millionaires making what somebody's making, under $26,000 a year trying to be an actor. These are struggling working actors,
They're
and
trying
it's
to trying to make the minimum so they can
exactly,
afford health care. Yeah,
yeah, and
and
we can
that's
all
it.
relate to that, right? I mean,
And
yeah,
in one of our previous conversations, I told you that, you know, after my VH1 years, and people saw me during the week on live weekday morning shows, that was that was the rent money. What kept
yeah,
me afloat was doing commercial work, and a lot of that commercial work did not air in the New York area. It was other parts of the country. Like I said, I did background work. I did bit roles. SAG really took care of me.
that's
SAG was
great.
a great help. And I'll just say it here. You know, folks may have seen me on Food Network, which At the time when I hosted the show, we were only going to do 13 episodes. SAG approved it. They said, "We know you're in a financial lull right now. Make sure your agent takes care of you," which my agent did. But just to
Mhm.
show the difference with non-union and non-union treatment is sort of like the treatment that the writers and actors are getting from producers.
Right.
When I when I had a SAG job or SAG after job, I got paid every 2 weeks.
Mm.
When I did when I shot 100 episodes, because the show wound up being a hit, when I shot 100 episodes for Food Network, I was lucky if I got paid every 2 months.
Yeah, the greed there and the lack of, when you hear the numbers that Sean was throwing around on what these corporate executives are making. I mean, it's kind of like that old adage when you go into a restaurant and somebody charges you, $150 for a steak. Somewhere in there, there's a break, right? That steak might be
Yeah,
worth $40 when you buy it and you fix it and whatever.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
when you get over a certain rate, that money just doesn't make any sense. And that's the same thing for these corporate
Yeah,
executives. When you're
yeah,
when you're making a hundred million a year and then they give you a $250 million bonus,
yeah.
that money should be distributed out a little bit. That sounds a little bit like
Right.
socialism, kind of, but
Yeah, but
yeah,
going back to Sean, what he said really makes you understand why Bob Iger's statement was so tone deaf.
uh,
Where he said, "This is
I
not the time when the actors and writers should be striking," and he's
yeah.
making like $275
Yeah,
million
yeah,
dollars.
easy to say for
Yeah,
you, but yeah, what it
yeah,
is, right?
yeah.
Well, Bobby, this has been fun. I want to let everybody know that this we got pretty serious on this one and kind of like down in the weeds a little bit more than we would. But Bobby and I have had discussions, and I think we agreed we'll do this about every 2 weeks. And the next one, I don't have a topic up yet, but it's going. Trust me, it'll be much lighter and much. It'll be a little bit more entertaining. I just wanted to cover this because it's so in everybody's face right
Yeah.
now, and I thought, let's just throw this out here now and kind of get it out there, and maybe educate people a little bit on what's going on. But I definitely want to. I'm gonna tap into your brain here, like the image is me putting a little electrode in your head and getting all of this knowledge out of you about all the people you've met, all the experiences you had, all the trivia you have on movies and television. And I think it'll be a lot of fun to pick a few topics per show and talk about that. And I look forward to doing that with you. I think it'll be great.
I do too, Frank. Thank you very much.
Good, man. All right. I will let you go. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. If you did tune in, if you haven't tuned in, please tell people about it. And we promise we will make this a little bit more lighthearted entertainment next time, or entertaining next time. Okay. Say bye, Bobby.
Bye, Bobby.